I just want to say, I want to start this by saying I spent my Sunday all day. Started at 9:30 in the morning. I finished at 9 p.m. Sunday night. I watched see Washington, the Indispensable Man by James Thomas Flexner. This is an awesome book. Got like little paintings. It's like a coffee table book, right? And there's a mini series called George Washington, the Indispensable Man. And it was made in 1984, and it premiered over 3 nights. April 8, 9, 10, 6, 7, 8, I don't remember. That doesn't matter. But I watched it. The first part 1 is 6 hours and 37 minutes, I think. And then there's a part 2, which they made 2 years later, which covers, that's 3 hours, 11 minutes. And that covers like his presidency. But then they don't cover the last 2 years of his life. I was very upset because he freed slaves when he was leaving his office, and he did not do that. And I was like very upset, very angry. But it was awesome. It was like 10 hours long total. But it was just, I just had a blast. So if you get bored and you want to watch a thing on George Washington, just type in Washington, the Indispensable Man, and there's 2 videos made in the 80s. They use real places, like real backdrops, like Williamsburg, Virginia. And I was looking at pictures when they do a House of Burgess scene. I was looking at the pictures that I was in the room that they filmed in, and then they use actual Mount Vernon. So it was very cool. It was I was very excited to watch it, and I'd watch it again. But none of that matters about this. But I just wanted to point that out. So, before we get started, there's a thanks button on the channel. You can donate. You don't have to. All donations are appreciated. You can subscribe to the channel. Click on that notification bell because it tells you when things happen. You know, Tasmanian Devils, whatever. I don't know what it notifies you for. And then if you don't want to do any of that, just if you don't want to do any of that, then just click on the thumbs up. That helps me. What is this? Oh, that's okay, that's behind me. Behind that. Okay. So I gave a little rant. Oh yeah. Before I get started. That's gonna be a coffee table book. I'm gonna put that out. And I got another one. I'm not gonna tell you what it's about. Alright. I'm not gonna tell you what this book is about. Look at that. That's just a cool room. There's G-dubs right up there. That's what we go. You know, all of us Washingtonites call them. All right. I think I got the Washington book I got at Mount Vernon, and then the history of the White House. I think I picked that up when I went to the Hermitage, Andrew Jackson's house. Kind of the echo's somewhat gone, maybe. I have a door right there. It's not connected. I had to take it off the hinge. I had to take all the door casing off the hinge to get a couch that was in this room out of the room. Don't believe me? There's the door casing. And then I'm getting my bookshelf set up. I got my the buck stops here on the window. Getting things kind of organized right now. Got a lot of work though. So, before we get started in the video, I'm going to tell you about the spiel that I already gave you because I've already forgotten. And I apologize. Let's get to the video.
Printed in Europe cannot be imported into Ottoman lands. Surely this is just a strange fatwa. Within 5-10 years people reversed. Quite the contrary. 1515, one of his descendants, Sultan Salim I, when the printing press is becoming more and more powerful, when 20 million books have been sold 20 million is a huge number, by the way. For 1500, think about it. 20 million books have been sold in Europe. 1515, Sultan Salim I issues a decree. What is the decree? Wallahi, you will not believe this. I'm not inventing this up. Look this up. Sultan Salim I issues a decree. Anybody who is caught with a printing press in any Ottoman land shall be executed. The penalty is death to own a printing press. And to own a book that's printed has its own hefty fines and, I don't know, whippings, lashings, whatnot. Basically, it is not just haram and kufr, it's you're ridda, you're murtad, basically, right? If you own a printing press, you are going to be executed. And execution is a punishment for murder, for rape, for highway robbery, and owning a printing press. Right? Notice the change of mindset now. It was blasphemous. You can't have anything to do with the printing press. Eventually, 1492, what happens in 1492? Granada
Columbus.
falls. Huge influx of Jews into Ottoman lands. The Jews...
Oh yeah. Why would the Muslim printing press care about that white guy discovered another continent?
Petition the Sultan. We had printing presses in Andalusia. Allow us to have printing presses here. So the Sultan says, okay, fine, just for you guys in your language, for your people. Don't sell to the Muslims. So the Jews and then the Christians get private printing presses that they use to educate their people. And it is not a coincidence that in Ottoman lands, the most educated bureaucratic class were Jews and Christians. The doctors and engineers were generally Jews and Christians. The physicians were almost always Christians. Right? It's not a coincidence where you have education. This is unlike 500 years ago when Ibn Sina is ruling the world in medicine. Now things are changing now, right? And the average Jew or Christian is way upper middle class because they have the education, they have the scientific background that is being deprived of Muslims. It is because of this ban that the first books printed in Arabic, the first Qur'ans printed, were not printed in Muslim lands. The first Qur'ans ever printed were printed by non-Muslims for non-Muslims. Because the Muslims refused to get involved in printing presses. And the first printed copy of the Qur'an, 1537, Venice, Italy. Venice, once again, Italy, and by the way, Italy is the founder or is the bastion of the Renaissance, mainly because of the Muslim influence on Italy, right? Dante's Divine Comedy, for those of you who know Western culture, which is really the spark that really sparked the Renaissance, 1327 or so. Dante's Divine Comedy is basically adopted from the Isra wal Mi'raj, the whole concept of going up to the heavens and going down to hell and seeing what's happening. The whole Divine Comedy is an adaptation of a book that it's a modern, everybody knows now, I mean it's a well-known fact that the entire story has come from Muslim folklore and legend. And many other things can be shown to have a direct impact. However, truth be told, they took these kernels from the Muslims and then they allowed these kernels to grow and flourish. It is not fair to say that the Muslims are completely responsible for Renaissance. It is true to say they sparked it. It is true to say they sparked it.
They sparked it and then didn't like how it was going, and then wanted nothing to do with it. They could have been involved in helping to shape, a narrative. It just blows me away how quickly they took something, made it better. Somebody else came along, took their idea, made it better, and then they just resented it. And man.
They allowed these sparks to come, but the geniusness cannot be denied. The Europeans did a lot to take from the Muslims and then take it to a different level. Getting back to the issue of the printing press, so the first Quran printed was in 1537, and the copies of this Quran, by the way, for many centuries we thought that no copies of this Quran had ever survived because it was so long ago. In 1980, a private copy was discovered by a collector in Florence in Italy, and so we have a copy of this Quran present now, or else we had thought that it had completely been destroyed. The second Quran to be printed was in 1694 in Hamburg by Abraham Hinkelmann, a Yehudi who printed the Quran for the second time, and we have copies of this in Germany. He's printing the Quran in Germany. And the third is in Russia. Muslims, they've lost the plot. They don't want anything to do with the printing press. Now, as we said, the Jews and Christians established printing presses in Ottoman lands by 1520, 1540. They have private printing presses. But
sorry, I want to do the setting real fast. Maybe drop it down a little bit. I know, is this set? I want to drop it down just because his movements and everything like that are a little off. We'll see how it looks.
But these are not in the language of the people. They're not in scholarly Turkish, in Ottoman Turkish. They're in their local dialects, and they are books that only the Christians and the Jews need to use. So these printing presses have no relevance to us in the broader scale of things. When was finally printing press introduced? Some thinkers were trying to get the printing press reintroduced and whatnot, and there were some ulama, there were some intellectuals who were arguing for the printing press. Perhaps the most famous of these was a Hungarian convert to Islam by the name of Ibrahim Mutafarrika, who in 1720, he is a Hungarian, he was born a Christian, and then he emigrated to the Ottoman lands, he converted to Islam, and he became a very high-ranking minister, and he is a European. And he is now a converted Muslim, he's a pious Muslim, and he petitions the Grand Mufti that we need a printing press. 300 years after Gutenberg invented the printing press, finally the Grand Mufti is being told, wake up and smell the coffee. Coffee is another issue. Inshallah, one day we'll talk about coffee, inshallah. It's another interesting story. I'm not joking with you. Coffee is also a very interesting story of its experience with Muslim lands, but that's a whole different, ballpark. So the Ibrahim, right?
Is there certain kinds of coffee grown in Muslim lands? Turkish coffee? Yeah, duh. Hey, shut your faces. Turkish coffee. I don't know.
It's a book that is called Wasilat al-Tiba'a, i.e. the printing press. Wasilat al-Tiba'a, how you print things, right? The printing press. Wasilat al-Tiba'a. And he writes it by hand, of course, because he's not allowed to use a printing press or else he'd be executed. So he writes a book about the printing press, handwritten, okay? And he hands it to the Grand Mufti. And he argues in this book that one of the reasons why Europe is catching us up, footnote, not catching us up, has already caught us and surpassed us. But in 1720, the Ottomans were still blinded. In 1720, the Ottomans still think we're going to win, right? Later on, it's pretty obvious that around 1600, the decline began. Right? But this is, hindsight is always 20/20. We never know. I mean, this is easy for us to say now. But in 1720, the Ottomans still thought we're going to win, no problem. So Ibrahim Mutafarrika writes this book. He presents it to the Grand Mufti. He says the reason why the Muslims are in decline is because we don't have the printing press. Because we're not educated. Because this, that. So the Sultan, the Grand Mufti agrees. Alhamdulillah, you say Alhamdulillah, takbir. But they put 3 conditions. Condition number 1. Nothing in Arabic. Condition number 2, nothing to do with Islam. You're not allowed to print books of the religion. Print books of medicine, print books of history. No Islamic book of history, no Islamic book of tafsir, no Islamic book of hadith should ever be printed under penalty of death still, right? And condition number 3, government approved list of books. List of books.
Sorry.
Control is completely in the hands of the government. We don't want anybody to just go and do free inquiry. We need to approve the book, cover to cover, stamp it before you're allowed to print it, right? SubhanAllah, I mean, even with these 3 conditions, at least the first printing presses are established, but these books are not going to change the Islamic psyche because they cannot have anything to do with Islam. But in 1726, a full 300 years after Gutenberg's printing press has been invented, and 300 years from now, right? This is 300 years ago. I mean, to give you an understanding, there was no America in 1726, right? This is when finally the printing press is allowed for secular books, not in Arabic, i.e. not in the scholarly language. Remember, Arabic is the language of scholars. Every Turkish citizen knows Arabic. Every Turkish Ottoman citizen knows Arabic as the language of scholarship. You're not allowed to write in language, you're allowed to write in the vernacular, the Turkish vernacular, right? And it cannot be a book about religion. Now, to give you an idea basically of what we're talking about, by the time the printing press is introduced to Arab lands, places as far away as Tahiti, much less Mexico City, already have full up and running printing presses, right? There are printing presses in Hawaii before there are printing presses in Damascus and Cairo. Understand this point, that the Muslim psyche of the time completely shut off the whole notion of there being free printing presses that are printing books of a normal nature. Now, when was this prohibition lifted? SubhanAllah, sadly, it wasn't even done by Muslims. Really sad. 1798, the first blatant act of colonialism occurs. Everybody should know this. What happens? Napoleon invades Egypt. The first act of, this is the beginning of colonialism, right? Why did Napoleon invade Egypt? To this day, people are writing books and theses about this. And of course, this is fundamentally problematic because you never try to rationalize Napoleon. You just assume Napoleon did things without a reason. There's no reason why we can understand why Napoleon would invade Egypt out of nowhere, but that's what he did. Now, when Napoleon invades Egypt, this is the beginning of modernity for the Muslim world. Wallahi, it is amazing to understand.
I can tell you why he did it. He saw those pesky pyramids, and he was like, I want them. I'm going to take them. And they were like, oh, okay. And then they got there, and they saw how big they were. And he was like, I'll be honest, they looked a lot smaller on Google Maps. I don't want them anymore. And they were like, yeah, let's go home. And he goes, deal. And then they all went home.
Mamluk dynasty is still functioning when Napoleon invades. The Mamluks, 700 years old. The Mamluks defeated the Mongols. These are the Mamluks, right? They're still living in that bubble. 700 years later, Napoleon finds people literally trying to oppose his forces, riding horses with bows and arrows. Literally, they have a few old guns, right? But that's it. And there is no question. Napoleon conquers all of Egypt in a week or two. That's a whole different history. We don't want to get there. Maybe someday, inshallah. But one of the things Napoleon does, now whatever you want to say about Napoleon, this guy's forward thinking. On the ships that he brought with him to invade Egypt, there is a printing press. Imagine. I mean, just imagine. You're invading a land, but you bring a printing press with you, right? And therefore, when he conquers Egypt, his printing press is established in Egypt, and it becomes, under Napoleon's tutelage, the very first free printing meaning without government conditions, right? First printing press in Muslim lands under Napoleon Bonaparte. Isn't that sad? But that is the reality. That is the reality. So when Napoleon leaves, he is forced to withdraw. Similar, I mean, there's a lot of parallels maybe between modern Iraq and ancient Egypt, in that it's easy to conquer, but once you've conquered, the people don't want you there. You know, Afghanistan, you can conquer, but then what, right? So the people rejected, and Napoleon had to basically sneak out one night and disappear, which is what he did as well. Modern times as well, Iraq, they just had to leave. You can't really do anything with the people who don't want to rule you. When he leaves the printing press there. And so the Muslims of the land break away from the Ottoman Empire. Mohamed Ali Pasha, all you Egyptians know the story from there. One of the reasons why Egypt becomes the pioneer of the Arab and Muslim world, not a coincidence, the printing press. One of the main reasons. And then Mohamed Ali Pasha's modernization is the second main reason. Or you can say the other way around, Muhammad Ali and then the printing press. But the printing press has a lot to do with it. And therefore, the very first Islamic printing press that was established, finally, is in around 1870.
I'm sorry. Okay. Sorry, I hate it on this screen. If you can see it, I apologize.
'70 or so.
There you go.
And it is called, who knows? very, very famous, but academic, a Bulaq printing press. I'll tell you. This is the Bulaq printing press in a small village, Bulaq, in Egypt. And to this day, by the way, I mean, as you know, alhamdulillah, I'm a scholar in this field, Islamic field, the best books ever printed Islamically are the Bulaq printing press books. Even though they're old.
Okay, sorry, I had to fix the screen. Back to the video.
Most authentic and scholarly. Why? Because the people in charge were not businessmen. They were actual scholars.
Let's go back a little bit.
Old, and there's types.
Okay.
Printing press in a small village, Bulaq, in Egypt. And to this day, by the way, I mean, as you know, alhamdulillah, I'm a scholar in this field, Islamic field, the best books ever printed Islamically are the Bulaq printing press books. Even though they're old and their typeset is old, but they're the most authentic and scholarly. Why? Because the people in charge were not businessmen. They were actual scholars. And so they edited ancient manuscripts and they made the best editions of Sahih Bukhari, of Fath al-Bari, of Ibn Kathir. This is the Bulaq printing press, right? This is in 1860s, 1870s. As I said, by this time you have printing presses in Tahiti and in Hawaii. And I'm not just making that up, literally. Tahiti and Hawaii, these small islands, and Hawaii was not a part of America back then, they have their printing presses up and running. Finally, the printing press is introduced in Qahira, and then after that in Baghdad and in other Arab lands. Clearly, way after things could have changed. Clearly, when the demise is basically well nigh 40, 50 years after this, in 1915, after World War I, the Ottoman Empire is basically made symbolic. The Khilafah is made much like the Pope in the Vatican, just like you have a symbolic thing. Within 6 years, Ataturk comes and he even abolishes this symbolic caliphate. All of this is not coincidental. All of this is not coincidental. The rise and eventual decline of paper and of the printing press is symptomatic. It gives us an indication of the rise and fall of the Ummah. Now, before we conclude, question arises, and this is really the question we need to be thinking about. Why did the Muslims oppose the printing press in the 1500s when they embraced paper 1,000 years or 700 years before this? Why did this shift of mind? Well, clearly there are some small economic and practical reasons, and some scholars try to hype this up. Economic reasons. The secretaries and the kuttab, the book scribes, are obviously going to lose their livelihood. And so they are petitioning against the printing press, right? It is also said that Arabic is a complex script, so to have letters that are all merging together, because Gutenberg didn't write in cursive. Gutenberg has block script, right? A, B, C, D, right? In the beginning was the word. The Gutenberg Bible is still, we still have 30 copies of the Gutenberg Bible. The actual Bible that he printed, we still have copies of them. These are individual letters, right? Arabic is not individual letters, right? Arabic has complex joinings and fonts and this and that. And when they finally did invent Arabic printing presses in the 1800s, it is said that they had over 700 different, what do you call these small things? Basically the characters are 700 different things. Now, surely that might be a reason, but that's not the main reason. I mean, where there's a will, there's a way. If Muslims wanted the printing press, they would have devised something to figure out this script or do something about this. A main reason why the printing press was opposed was because, number one, it was assumed that this was a technology of the kafirs. And this is a fact. The Muslims became so arrogant and so proud that we rule the world, because they were at the top of the world, that when something came to them from outside of their lands, they said, no, this can't be better than us. We didn't do this, so there's got to be something wrong with this, right? And so they became so deluded by their own accomplishments that they shut themselves off to external accomplishments. There was also another reason, and that was a very scholarly reason, and there's an element of truth to this. The scholars said, ulama, my class, unfortunately I had a big thing to do with this as well. They said, Not only is this kafir, okay, we all hear this as well. I'm purposely being mockful here because this is exactly what we hear to this day, right? The ways of the kuffars and dressing like the kuffar and imitating the kuffar. We still have this type of psyche left. But not only this, but we have another reason the scholars said. The scholars said, now this has a kernel of truth. They said, if we were to open printing press, we will dilute Islamic scholarship. How? Everybody will start reading. And you will have, let me be modern now, Mufti Wikipedia and Sheikh Google. You see where we're coming here now, right? That if we open up the doors to the printing press, what's going to happen? You will read Sahih Bukhari, I will read Sahih Bukhari. You will read Ibn Kathir, I will read Ibn Kathir. What will I do as the Sheikh when you become Sheikhful as well? You see what the point here, right? There's a power struggle. Which has happened, صح, بالضبط, which has happened to a level. Now, they had this concern that they wanted to keep the ijazah system. What is the ijazah system? I have Sahih Bukhari. This is it. You want it, there's only one way for you to get it. Come to me. I'll teach it to you. And you can copy my copy and you recite it to me. I will say, so and so has mastered Bukhari. Yalla tafaddal, go teach Bukhari. You see, this is not coming out of thin air. There's an element of truth here, right? There's something that makes sense, that you want to keep scholarship high. Now, in our times, let's fast forward. We have Sheikh Wikipedia and Mufti Google, right? And we have plenty of people whose entire Islamic education comes from the internet and cassettes and online. Let me be frank with you. You who have not studied abroad scholarly, can you tell the difference between a real scholar and a Mufti Wikipedia scholar? Dr. Bashar, what do you say? Be honest with me. Yes, of course. Yes, you can. Now, perhaps some people cannot, and I understand. Yes, perhaps some people cannot. But somebody who has even a basic knowledge can instantaneously tell the difference between a quack and a real alim. Common sense, looking at some signs here and there, right? I'm not a doctor, I've said this a million times. I'm not a doctor, but wallahi, if somebody comes and give me some fancy schmancy cure, I have some intelligence, right? I can tell a real doctor from a person who's a quack. It's something that requires a little bit of common sense, a little bit of knowledge of what medicine is. It is difficult for many, but it's not impossible. My point here, I know it's getting late, inshallah, 5 more minutes. My point here, if the scholars had adopted the printing press, and they had included and incorporated it into their system, they could have had their cake and eaten it too.
I'm going to end it there. Yes. Yes. Yes, 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 yes. Yes, 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 yes. That's what I said. I said that in the end of this, in the second video. That they just rejected it out of hand. Now, my thinking is that they rejected it, as he said, because they thought they were better than it. They were so closed in, and maybe they felt insulted that the Europeans, the Christians, had taken their idea. And so they as they would say here, they circled the wagons, they closed in. We're not going to allow any of our stuff out. And then once they realized, oh man, they're really just going crazy with that printing press. They're just putting out books, putting out papers all over the place. Then it probably became well, look, they're not as good as us. And they didn't bother to see that it was advanced. And if they would have just not pulled away, they could have probably, as I said on the other one, taken what the Europeans had done and made it better. They could have adapted to what the Europeans did, and maybe from there they see something and it sparks them and they make something better. You have no idea. but to have just closed up, man, that hurt. This, by the way, was a donated request from Mohamed. I forgot to say that. I think in the start of the second video. Maybe I did. I don't know. Anyways, I'm going to end this here and I'll come back for part 4. But until then, you're going to have to sit at your computer or sit wherever you are with your phone in your hand and wait for this video to pop up. You can't do anything. You have to just wait. So until then, have a good day. Have a good night.